changed with the years, yet whenever I return here, there is a sense that everything is just as it used to be. Our guest of honor tonight is the Norwegian author Fوسه, who builds his world through slow prose, much like the stones of this very building were polished by the slow passage of time. He dissolves the barriers between past and present, and even between life and death. His narrative flows smoothly, just like water, suggesting that time runs in a single continuous stream, converging and diverging all at once. Fوسه is the 2023 Nobel laureate in literature, was recognized for his innovative plays and prose which give voice to the unsayable. He honors us with his presence on stage this evening, and I invite you to listen not only to his words, but also to what he leaves unsaid. It is our great pleasure to present to you فوسه, فرحبوا معي بالضيف.
I was asked to write a quite short speech to begin this all, and I've done that. Dear all, it's a great honor and pleasure to be with you tonight here in Saudi Arabia. So thanks a lot to the organizer of this festival for inviting me. My name is Fوسه. I grew up by a fjord, the Hardanger fjord, in the western part of Norway, in a rather small community. In fact, the word Fوsه means the place by the waterfall. And there was actually a waterfall there. Since then, life has brought me to many places around the world, and now to Saudi Arabia. Both my books and my plays have traveled a lot. Works of mine have been translated to over 60 languages, and plays have been produced, the least in that many countries. I have often asked myself why my writing travels so well. I grew up in this small place from where I have my most formative experiences, and I write in a small language. I'm not at all an autobiographical writer, but still my basic experiences and my language are connected to this place. I have to admit that I was really surprised when a play of mine, actually the first play I ever wrote, and today also my most produced play, Somebody Is Going to Come, was produced in Paris in 1999 to really great reviews and played to a full house. And this was in a really big theater. And they played it for as long as it was possible. It was also amazing that I wrote this play in my 30s, and the French director, Claude Ricci, was in his 80s. Still, the production he directed showed an incredible, deep understanding for my writing. He saw the deepest layers of meaning in my play. It struck me as almost a wonder, as a kind of wonder of meaning. Since then, there have been over 1,000 productions of my plays all over the globe, north, south, west, east, and my novels have been translated into over 50 languages. I still really can't believe it. To put it in general words, I think that literature that managed to travel well, in a certain sense, world literature, must have something completely new to it to be interesting. Perhaps even must be something idiosyncratic. It must be unique, and at the same time, it must be completely universal. This sounds perhaps almost as a contradiction. At least it sounds, and surely is, a kind of paradox. And then it strikes me that also human beings are so. All of us are completely unique. At the same time, all of us share all the fundamental traits that constitute us as human beings, something completely universal. And also human beings are paradoxical, with a soul and body connected in a way no one really can explain. So literature resembles human beings, or the other way around, human beings resemble literature. In my view, human beings also has what I call spirit. And the spirit has something to do with the connection between body and soul. Sometimes I think about spirit as the point where body and soul are connected. And I also think something of the same goes for literature, where, to say, its form and its content meet. At that point, you can find the spirit of literature. Another paradox is that I think it is possible to keep this spiritual quality, this spirit, also in translation. When a work is transformed from one language to another, a lot, if not all, both of the content and of the form can be kept. Still not all. But what I think can be kept and can be translated is what I call the spirit of the work. I also think that this spiritual dimension is the same for all kinds of art. And it is also connected to the religious dimension of life, to what one might dare to link to God. These words are far too big and too abstract, so I better stop here. I would like to end with a greeting said in Norwegian. Alt godt til dykk. All the best to you.
شكرا لضيفنا العزيز على هذه الكلمة الثرية. أقدم لكم الآن الأستاذ طارق الخواجي، المستشار الثقافي لمركز الملك عبد العزيز الثقافي العالمي، الذي سيحاور ضيفنا، وأرجو لكم تجربة ماتعة.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مساء الخير جميعا. أعتذر لإدارة الحوار باللغة الإنجليزية بسبب اللغة المشتركة التي يتحدثها ضيفنا. كان ودي أتحدث مع النرويجية لكن ربما مرة أخرى. أتمنى أن تكون هذه الجلسة ممتعة. يمكن للجميع المشاركة بالأسئلة من خلال الكود الذي سيظهر على الشاشة. يستطيع أي واحد منكم أن يرسل السؤال وسأستجيب لهذا السؤال من الجهاز وأسأل الضيف الكريم. It's great to have you here, Mr. Fose. I will go direct to the questions, and maybe within our discussion we can figure out the way of the flow of the discussion. I will start from one of your famous quotes, writing as an act of listening. Let me say it's a fascinating way to express the writing and the process of writing. Could you take us further into discussing this idea of writing as an act of listening?
Yeah, I can give it a try. It's very hard to describe the act of writing because it's a kind of secret act, I would say. But I prefer to start writing knowing nothing about what I'm going to write. Perhaps, and of course, if it's a play or a novel or a genre, what kind of genre, but no more. And then I just sit down, start writing, and when I've written some pages, a lot is already there. It's defined. The rest is defined. And when I keep on writing, I listen to, of course, what I've already have written, and then to something else that I really don't know what is. You sit there and you keep on writing, and you listen. It's a metaphor, of course, but to describe it, I call it a kind of listening. The strange thing is that at a certain point, normally, I get this feeling that what I'm about to write, it's already there. It's not inside me, it's out there, it's ready. I just have to write it down before it disappears. And I've been a writer for quite many years by now. My first novel I wrote at 20.
Yeah.
I'm 66 by now, and this novel was published when I was 23. So, and I've written an enormous lot to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But what keeps fascinating me about writing is not being a writer like this in official connection and so on. It's just the simple act of writing, and a great happiness when the writing is writing itself.
Yeah, it's happening.
When something out in me or whatever is simply doing the writing. I'm not the person that's doing the writing. This state gives a great happiness, I would say. Yeah.
And during this moving from field to field, you have books written for children, you have poetry books and plays and novels, novellas, essays. So the process is different from, I would say, different fields of art.
You know, I started out writing very early, at the age of 12, and I felt it as a place that I somehow could escape to. Go away from the world, from everything, and just sit down somewhere and write. And then I wrote the first small poems and small stories. And I, at the same time, played a lot of music. I was mad about music, I could perhaps say. I played the guitar and both electric guitar and classic
so it's
guitar.
rock music.
Yeah, also, both rock and classical music. But then at a certain point, you ask me why I cannot answer. I stopped listening to music, I stopped playing the music, I started writing more seriously. And at college, I wrote my first novel. No one has ever read it, and I'm happy with that.
Red and Black?
It's very epigonical, I would say. And then my second novel was published. It's called Red Black.
Yeah. Yeah, your writing is described as a belonging to mystical realism. Do you think I am wrong in saying that there are also features of a stream of consciousness in your novels?
Yeah, you can say it's basically about the mind of one person. But if you think about stream of consciousness in a kind of Joyce way, with like say in Ulysses, the end monologue where it goes on like that, it isn't like that. It's the thinking and the observation and the sensation of one specific human being, basically. Not in all my novels, but in most of them. And even in my plays, you could say, even if there are 4, 5 characters or so, it's still a kind of monologue.
Yeah.
I guess at least some directors and people who have written about my theater keep saying that it's still a kind of interior monologue, even if it's divided into 4 or 5 characters or 2, 3 or whatever.
One of your early works in the plays, and you mention it in your speech, somebody is going to come. And it's natural for the reader to think of Samuel Beckett, so Waiting for Godot. You have mentioned being influenced by him before. To what extent did Beckett exert this influence, and in what ways was it most evident in your writing?
You know, in a certain sense, I started writing before I started reading, I could say. And what I read very young, when I started out writing, it was 2 Norwegian writers. It was Tarjei Vesaas and Knut Hamsun. They were my 2 early favorites. Not that many years later, I read Samuel Beckett and somehow fell in love with his periods, or the soul of his periods, as I would like to put it. And yeah, especially his plays, I think I can say. And I wrote, in the 80s, I wrote novels and also published collections with poetry. Then I was commissioned, in fact, to write a play. And I didn't really want to do it because I wasn't interested in theater. I never went to the theater and so on. So, but I tried somehow to survive as a writer, to make a kind of living as a writer. And that can be easy as it is now, and but it wasn't easier for many years. I was a really poor artist, And then I was offered, for me, quite a big amount of money just to write the beginning of a play, and then in place of writing just the beginning, I wrote the whole play. And I was also asked to write the beginning and a synopsis, and synopsis has nothing at all to do with writing. That's completely something else. You cannot write a synopsis of literature as little as you can write a synopsis of music, I would say. So, and then literature comes from literature, but in a certain way you have to add something new to make it your own rating of something of some value. And I was, in a certain way, afraid of Beckett as an influence on me as a possible playwright. And then to say something contradictory, I said somebody is going to come as an answer to Waiting for Godot, of course. Waiting for Godot, somebody's coming. Yeah. So, and I think I managed quite well to escape the influence of Samuel Beckett. But I never escaped the influence of Tarjei Vesaas and Knut Hamsun. And still one of my favorite that I read when I was very young, an Austrian poet called Georg Trakl. His voice is still with me, I would say.
What about Vesaas and the birds?
What about
Vesaas?
Oh, Vesaas, I read him very young, and I don't know, but when you get really fascinated by something you read, you change, you're taken out of your normal world and universe and your normal limitations and taken into another space. And I guess I experienced that when reading Tayevesos, especially his novel The Birds.
Yeah.
That's still my favorite. And this novel I talked about that I wrote at college, that was extremely influenced by Tayevesos. That's why it was epigonical, and that's why no one has ever read it except me. Yeah.
You mentioned your passion for music, and I think you have other passion is the poetry. And my question is about, do you think some element of your passion in the past has moved to your novels and writing?
Yeah. I had this transformation from being madly concerned with music and to start writing. And when writing, I, in a way, tried to go back to enter the universe of music and the universe of playing. So my way of writing with all the repetitions and variations and so on, the concentrations, I think it's writing to me, it's much closer to the work of a composer than to the work of a journalist, to put it that way. Or it's even closer to, I imagine at least, to the work of a painter than to someone taking just a documentary photo. Yeah.
Yesterday, when we have a discussion, I was interested in your talk about your interest in philosophy, and specifically in German philosophy. And to be more specific is Martin Heidegger. So, and then I read that you spent a lot of time reading Time and Being and Time. So this is your fascination about philosophy. Is it personal interest, or is it having something related to your writing? Or
I studied philosophy and comparative literature, and I ended up reading Martin Heidegger. And in the first place, I tried to read him in English, but it was impossible to understand his writing in English. So then I thought, okay, you know a little German, you have to read him in German. And so I did. And then, in a strange way, his philosophy opened up to me. So if you're asking about my biggest influence, it's not this or that writer. I would say it's Martin Heidegger, and to a certain degree also Wittgenstein. They are more important than, let's say, Beckett or Dessers. So,
one of the things that struck me most while reading your novels is the character internal monologue and how they speak little but says a lot, or said a lot.
Yeah. Since I was studying, I guess it might be a kind of explanation. Since I was studying theory, the concept of theory, philosophy, literary theory, and writing at the same time, I felt this huge distance between what a concept could manage to say and what was possible to say through the tradition of literature, or to write a novel or a poem. And the theory of the science of literature, it couldn't grasp it at all. There are two quite different ways of using language. So I, in the end, decided that if I had a gift at all, it belonged to the writing of literature, not as a theorist of literature or something. And what I learned from this schisma, to call it that, it was that how important the simple, basic words are. For instance, chair, table, stone, all these simple, basic words. And if you describe this chair like this or that or whatever, you add some interesting information in a certain sense, but not in the existential way that I, influenced perhaps by Heidegger, try to write literature. So I also, from very early on, had a dislike for using names. I felt they're limiting so much. So my first novel, the young man, it was a young man, of course, is only called Han, he, yeah. And the father is called the father, and so on. And that goes through almost everything I've written, both plays and my novels. And yeah, of course, in poetry you rarely use names, but if you use them, they have a specific sound or emotional or musical effect or connotation. Yeah.
In septology, there is a deep fascination with the names in that work. Turning them into mystery serves the plot. I am a reader who sometimes find myself drawn to the idea of the doppelganger, can I say, or the double, or are tales of astonishing possibilities of human life, as if one were living in parallel universe, or there is a loop in time, or something like that.
Yeah, you know, when I'm writing, as I said, I prefer not to plan anything. I try to follow the laws of the text I'm actually writing, and they are very different. If you read several of different novels of mine, you see that there are different universes.
Yeah.
They are ruled by quite different rules, yeah, or laws, or how to put it. So. In this process of writing, these laws a lot of them are established when you have written one page, more when you have written 5, 10, etc. And then a lot of these laws has something to do with the use of time. I very rarely write a chronological story. Sometimes I do that too, but quite often I mix time. Let's say septology, as this longest novel of mine, it's in a certain sense just a moment stretched out. Yeah, and then you can mix a lot both of time and other elements. There are two, perhaps, main characters in that novel. Both are called Asle.
No.
Sometimes he's like you and me, two different persons. Sometimes you could start wondering if he's just one and the same person, or alternative versions of the same person. And that's telling something about the ability of literature, that you can concentrate quite my manuscript, it was 1,500 pages, and you can concentrate such a long line into a certain, just a point or a moment in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the scenes that I see it in the novel, it's like taking out of the time. So when Asle was passing by his car, and there is a couple who's playing on swings, and the lady is sitting in the swing, and the other guy was, and they are still, they don't talk, and then he starts seeing something. And for me, I thought it's maybe like Asla in his youth, in his younger age.
Yeah.
So this has happened twice, and three times, 4 times.
Yeah, it's both his past, his growing up, appears, but even the future.
Yeah.
What's going to happen in the future is seen in the presence of the narration, to say it like that. So, but if it's to me, it's very simple. If it works, then it's okay. Then it's just fine, perfect. If it doesn't work, then it isn't worth anything. So I would say that as simple as literature, it has to be beautiful in a way, and it has to be true in a way.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do in writing is to achieve this, to achieve beauty and to achieve truth. And truth isn't the same as the truth about facts. It's at least not the truth. No, truth isn't about facts. It's about something else.
Your work is heavily influenced by the landscape and the environment of the Western Norway. And although the towns and villages are fictional in your works, from a simple visit, I believe they are connected in a way between the fictional places in your novels and the true cities and villages in Western Norway.
Yeah. You know, I grew up for the most part in, as I mentioned, in a small community by the Hardangerfjord. And to grow, it was, in a way, a strange place to grow up. I remember the complete darkness, and then you had light in one house there and one house there, and all the time you heard the waves, the rhythm of the waves, coming and coming and coming.
Yeah.
Walking along this small country road, listen to the waves, seeing light in that house and light in that house. All these kinds of moods, and I was basically formed by this landscape and by the language of this landscape that we in Norway call nynorsk or New Norwegian. It's for the most part based on dialects from this western part of Norway. It's not at all a dialect. It's a constructed language in a certain sense, based on various dialects. Overall, yeah, from everywhere in Norway, but mainly, perhaps you could say, from the western part. And this language, to a certain degree, I'm quite sure it's also forming. It's very formative for what and the way I actually write, I think.
Yeah.
You get in each and every language, it's possible to say this and not that. Like we spoke about Heidegger in English and in German.
Yeah.
He can speak oaths. You can understand him if you read him in German. It's very hard to understand him if you read him in English. At least for me, it's like that. And the same with Georg Trakl, the Austrian poet I mentioned. I completely understand him when I read him in German. When I read him in English, he's almost, I don't know, what's this all about? What's the point of this? It isn't possible to translate it. But then the literature, it's quite different. Some literature, it's possible to translate, and some it isn't possible. And even if I cannot prove it, I think I can prove it because my plays are traveling that well, and even my novels by now, so they must be translatable.
Yeah.
They must be able to travel. And I learned that quite fast when I saw productions of my plays, let's say in China or Japan or wherever. The emotionality and the abstract form of the play, it was visible on the stage. Yeah. And it came completely over, and the way the audience reacted to it, it was also, I could tell it from that they got the play, it reached them. So how it is with my fiction, I don't know. Of course, I don't know what's going on in this and that reader, but to tell from the reception, it works quite well in quite many languages. Yeah.
People always talk about award and how the writer's life change after award. Maybe the burden of the award, maybe the social, I will say, behavior of the people change toward the writer. Sometimes it's burden for the writer to come up with amazing works like the things that they did before. So to what extent this Nobel Prize? And I know that you received a lot of awards in your life. So maybe this is not a different matter.
Yeah, no, I've received quite. In the beginning, my writing had really, really bad reviews, and I felt almost like I was close to hate by many people, and especially in Norway, of course. And then I had and my breakthrough as a writer, it wasn't in Norway, it was in Sweden, or dear neighbors, sweet brother, as we call them.
Yeah.
And when I had that breakthrough in Sweden, then I also had a kind of breakthrough in Norway. So, but what I learned a lesson from this, and that was very important, I think. It's that you have to stick to yourself, to what you know. if you know something, you have to stick to that and don't listen to this or that review or the opinion of this or that person. You have to stick to what you know. That's your gift, that's your secret, that's your talent, that's exactly what you know. And then you cannot listen to this or that, telling you are an idiot. But on the other side, when you no longer are an idiot, when you are a Nobel laureate, then you cannot listen to that either. You cannot listen to it.
Yeah.
You have to stick to yourself. If they tell you you're an idiot, or they tell you, oh, you're a Nobel Prize winner, you cannot care about it in your writing. That I'm sure about. You have to find what you have to stick to and stick to that. And it gives itself, at least it did that for me. But when it comes to ordinary life, of course the Nobel, it's such, you know, I knew it was a very important prize and the most important prize for literature in the world. And of course, I as every writer, think I had a certain dream of to get the Nobel one day, but I think I said to myself, no, you're not that crazy, Jon. You don't think you will never get it. So just forget it. So because of that, I was surprised when I actually was given the Nobel. And the prize has a kind of magical force for reasons it's hard to explain. I immediately start to get an enormous lot of invitations and requests for interviews, and all the time, I have agents for my plays and for my literature and my Norwegian publisher. I have a lot of good helpers that helped me sort things and organize it for me. But there's such an amount of correspondence, I would say, connecting to receiving the prize, that it's overwhelming completely. And let's say in Norway, when I walked the streets of Oslo, people interested in literature or theater, they knew me, or at least some of them, or perhaps most of them. But when you have won the Nobel, then you're changed from a subcultural person to a national icon in a certain way. So I think you almost goes from being a subject, a writer, a subject, to be a kind of object or a kind of historical fact.
Yeah.
And that of course, it's double. I think most laureates have said that it's a blessing, but it's also a curse. And you have to really fight for the privacy and the loneliness needed to keep on writing. I need a distance to the world to manage to write, and to keep that distance, you have to simply fight it. And the most important word by far, if you receive the Nobel, it's no.
The first questions from the audience is about a great book, but it's not your book, so I'm not going to discuss that. And the question after that is about how did you discover your writing style? And the girl who asked the question is asking about, is there advice for the new writers to discover their writing style or technique?
I've already, to a certain degree, mentioned both of it. To a new writer, to a new artist, I would say stick to yourself. Don't listen to this or that person, to all the advice you get and to all the criticism. Stick to your vision, to your inner secrets, to your inner light, I would say. There's a strong light in each and every human being, and you have to stick to what that light is illuminating in you. That's my message, I would say. And as I said, I think my way of writing, I think it's just an explanation. I don't know if it's the truth, but that I'm thinking that it had to do with this transformation from being madly concerned with music and to start writing. And to try to recreate in writing what I experienced in music. So, in another sense, I think you can, all literature, in a certain sense, it comes from literature. So the more you read and the better literature you read, the cleverer you most likely will be.
There is someone is asking about in scene of childhood, scenes from childhood, and he is asking about what was that in the mind when you wrote it in the fragment formats.
You know, when I was a child, growing up in this faraway place, I had no idea at all of being a writer, and even when I grew older, I knew I liked to write, but to be a writer, that was outside my ambition or what I thought possible for me. It was not for a person like me. So to make a living, since I like to write, I thought that I perhaps could make a living by writing, working as a journalist for a local regional paper or something like that. And then my first novel was published, and the first took the second, and then my first play was published, and the first took the second. And so suddenly I was a writer suddenly, and then I was a playwright suddenly. It has just happened. I haven't controlled it. I have had no plan, no intentions. It has just happened. So that gives me a strange feel about life. Why is it just happening? It's like writing, it's also just happening. Yeah. And life, in a certain way, also is just happening. You have a kind of will that you can regulate it somehow. But for instance, by saying no as a Nobel laureate. But on another level, you have no control. At least I don't have it.
There is someone has a very nice question. It's a full moon tonight in the middle of the desert. We are not in the middle of the desert, but let's say it's different than Norway, but similar in a way. There you have the silence of the ice, and here you have the silence of the desert. Can you tell us what did you hear here?
I think the silence of the ocean, the sea, and the silence of the desert. There are obvious similarities, I think. You are that dependent on the weather and the conditions. You have to be. I love to keep a boat myself, and I love to go out boating, but you are completely unfree in the boat. You just take a step to the left or to the right, then you're drowned and you're dead. You're gone. At the same time, you feel very free when you're out in this boat. It's just another paradox of life. And I don't know much about how to manage the desert, but I guess you have very strict rules for how to manage it.
One of the questions is about your routine, I will say, or your exercise about writing. Do you write every day? And they try to understand, there is breaks between book and the other book?
You know, it has changed over the year, of course. But for me, by now, I have to make pauses and breaks between when I wrote my own stuff and what I do by now in between. Mostly I'm translating. And of course, I also spend a lot of time answering emails at the time being. It's been like that for many years, but more and more and more. And but in long periods, I do not write at all. That also has to do with that. I feel like writing. It's somehow you have to leave yourself, go out on a kind of journey, and to leave yourself. It's a bit scaring. You can lose yourself completely. So you have to feel. You have to be in a rather mental, stable state. At least I have to to write. And that because if I'm writing well, I have to bring something new to the world for me, and hopefully also for other peoples. That didn't exist before, and to get to that, you have to leave yourself in a certain way.
Yeah.
If you don't leave yourself, you know exactly what you knew before. This journey, it's demanding in a certain sense, and also to keep my. Perhaps I'm crazy, but I'm not completely crazy. If you kept on writing all the time, you could lose yourself.
Yeah, you can lose yourself. One of the questions is asking about something I don't know if you are interested in or not. It's talking about artificial intelligence, AI.
Yeah. I don't know that much about it. It's a new phenomena, and perhaps it's a childish idea, but I think that art and literature, it has so much to do with this universal individuality of the artist, that it cannot possibly be replaced by a machine. No, it cannot. When that's said, a lot of genre literature or commercial literature in a certain sense, that I think a machine can write that quite fast and quite well. And let's crime literature. That'll be a simple task, but not a great poem like Georg Trakl wrote his poem or Terje Vesaas wrote his The Birds. No, that couldn't be done by a machine. But when Vesaas had written The Birds and Trakl had written his poetry, then perhaps a machine can copy it. Yeah. And I've done it myself. I asked a computer to write something by me, and it was like a kind of parody, but still there were some very interesting sides to it, and there were some great metaphors that happened that I couldn't have figured out myself. Oh, that was good. That was good. So it's I don't know. It's a strange situation we are in at the time, I think, with this kind of artificial intelligence appearing. And I also asked my dear Mac to write a kind of essay about subtology, and it was really impressive, I have to tell you. Yeah. So I think for teachers, scholars of literature and teachers in school, it must be difficult when a machine can write so well, and how can you know if a student has written it?
About your reading, let's go out from writing into reading. So do you still read like before? I mean, in your early age, you write before you read, you said, but later on you start reading books, a lot of books.
I've read quite a lot in my life, but in periods. I've had for some years I read a lot of the philosophy and the theory of language. What actually is language? Trying to understand that. For instance, also Martin Heidegger was part of, and Wittgenstein, of course, but they were part of that kind of reading. And I have had such periods that have lasted for years. But then I'm through with it, and then I go to another main subject. And but what has been with me all the time, that isn't that many writers, I would say, and I keep reading them over and over again, many of them. And I'm the most interested, I would say, in the classic, in classical literature, and especially the modernist classic, like Virginia Woolf is no doubt one of my favorites.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and for your answering all the questions, and be patient with us. I hope you enjoy every time of this interview. شكرا جزيلا للحضور الكريم على حضوركم. أتمنى لكم ليلة سعيدة وشكرا.
Thank you.
شكرا لضيفنا ومحاوره على هذا الحوار الملهم حول البساطة، في مديح البساطة في الكتابة الإبداعية. تنتظركم الآن منصة توقيع مع يون فوسه في البلازا في حال أحببتم الحصول على نسخكم الخاصة. شكرا لكم.